15 minutes talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Neil Oliver. You can join me live every Saturday evening for opinions and discussions about the week's top stories. There's also a smattering of history and archaeology and features that define our great British Isles. You'll hear my thoughts unfiltered, as well as those of my guests, and we don't always agree. And we want to hear from you too. Neil Oliver Live, Saturdays from 7 on GB News.
Join me, Mark White, here on GB News. For more than 2 decades, I've been at the sharp end of reporting crime and security at home and abroad. From the scourge of terrorism to the fight against violent crime and the deepening small boats crisis in the Channel. They're issues you rightly care about, and so do I. As GB News Home and Security Editor, my focus will be on the stories that matter to you.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry and this is Dewbs Co, the show where we will get into everything that has got you talking today. What a difference a day makes. Oh, so the song goes, but boy, it certainly does. I can tell you now, trying to keep up with what's gone on over the last 24 hours or so is enough to make you dizzy. We've had accusations of more rule-breaking parties. We've had, let's face it, a bit of a media witch hunt. We've had a resignation, we've had introduction of Plan B measures and suggestions of the need for a national conversation re compulsory vaccinations. Oh yeah, and the Prime Minister has had yet another baby. Whew. But tonight, I want to know, was Boris Johnson right to have introduced Plan B? What about these so-called parties? Do you care? And who leaked that footage? And why now? What is going on? And what on earth do you make to compulsory vaccinations? Are you all for them? The quicker the better? Or absolutely not? Aside from COVID, a consultation has opened on a so-called victims' law where, amongst other things, prosecutors would meet crime victims before making a charging decision. Sounds great, but with court backlogs in their tens of thousands, how's that going to work? And a hotel group has released their weirdest customer requests. Anonymously, of course. Have you ever made any weird requests at your hotel? Or have you worked at a hotel and received weird requests? I want to know all about them. But first, let's have a look at the news headlines. Good evening, I'm Tamsin Roberts. These are the latest headlines. The Cabinet Secretary will now investigate 3 alleged parties in Downing Street and Whitehall during lockdown last year. During urgent questions in the House of Commons, Cabinet Minister Michael Ellis said they are looking into several claims. It comes after a leaked video showing Number 10 staff laughing about an alleged Downing Street party, which forced the resignation of government aide Allegra Stratton. Here's what Paymaster General had to say in the Commons earlier.
Now, I can confirm to the House that the Cabinet Secretary's investigation will establish the facts surrounding the following. Allegations made of a gathering at Number 10 Downing Street on the 27th of November 2020, a gathering at the Department for Education on the 10th of December 2020, and allegations made of a gathering at Number 10 Downing Street on the 18th of December 2020.
Meanwhile, Boris Johnson is facing a revolt from Tory backbenchers who are questioning the government's credibility in enforcing England's Plan B COVID rules. New restrictions include extending mandatory masks to indoor public venues such as cinemas and theatres, whilst guidance to work from home where possible will return on Monday. Mr Johnson has denied bringing forward announcements to divert attention from the row. Conservative MP Andrew Rossendale has told GB News he'll vote against the measures.
I understand why, when the pandemic hit to begin with, none of us knew what we were facing, and the government was right to take action. Since then, I think that it has been a huge overreaction and we're not calculating the effects of lockdowns. So why, at this very point, when we're looking forward to Christmas, when businesses are really at their peak in terms of what they need to do for Christmas, to then restrict things, I don't really understand why we're doing it.
Well, meanwhile, Public Health Scotland is urging people to not attend Christmas parties. In a tweet, it says, given the rise of coronavirus outbreaks linked to Christmas celebrations, people should defer parties. PHS Medical Director Dr Nick Finn said by postponing some plans, we can all do our bit to protect ourselves and our loved ones. Dominic Raab and Grant Shapps are self-isolating after being in contact with the Australian Deputy Prime Minister, who has since tested positive for coronavirus. Barnaby Joyce confirmed the news while travelling in Washington, D.C. The ministers had both met Mr Joyce when he was in London earlier in the week. Scottish Conservative leader Douglas Ross is also self-isolating after a member of his staff tested positive for COVID. In other news, police have disrupted 7 late-stage terror attacks in the UK since the start of the coronavirus pandemic. Counter-terrorism policing say the latest figures take the total number of foiled terrorism plots in the last 4 years to 32. They're also calling on people to remain vigilant over the festive period. Boris Johnson is facing renewed questions into a donation used to pay for the redecoration of his Downing Street flat. It comes after the Conservative Party was fined almost £18,000 by the Electoral Commission. It says the Tories failed to accurately report a donation and keep a proper accounting record. A party spokesperson said they were considering an appeal. The Scottish Finance Secretary has confirmed income tax rates will stay the same next year. Kate Forbes announced the freeze during the budget at Holyrood this afternoon. Other measures include a minimum wage floor at £10.50 per hour, which could mean an extra £76 a month for social care staff. It's the first budget to be put forward jointly by the SNP and Scottish Greens. The UK is experiencing its largest ever outbreak of bird flu. Around 500,000 birds have been culled so far, with 40 infected premises across the UK. But the risk to human health remains very low, according to public health advice, and there's a low risk to food safety. The chimney at Scotland's last remaining coal-fired power station has been demolished. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon pushed the button to ignite 700 kilos of explosives to bring down the chimney, which has stood at Longannet in Fife for over 50 years. Scotland has been coal-free since the station closed in 2016. Those are the top stories. Now let's get back to Dewbs Co. Hello there, thanks for that, Tamsin, and welcome back. Keeping me company until 7 o'clock tonight, my panel, Claire Pearsall, who's a former Tory advisor. You would have had your work cut out at the moment, I can tell you that, Claire. John Gaunt, radio host, podcaster and columnist, and Silky Carlo, who's a director of Big Brother Watch. Again, someone else who must have their work cut out at the moment. You know the drill as well on this show. It's not just about us and our opinions, it's also about you. If it matters to you, then it matters to me. I want you to get in touch and let me know what you're thinking tonight on all of the different topics that we will cover. You can get in touch with me on email, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews, or of course Facebook. I'm not cool enough to be on Snapchat or anything like that, but GB News is, so you can get in touch with us there. Let's get into our top story tonight. I mean, come on now, there's only one real story in town on the top of it, isn't it? COVID again. Viewers, I long for the day that I don't have to talk to you about COVID and measures. Alas, we're not quite there yet. And from tomorrow, you might have noticed, Plan B measures will be applied in England following Prime Minister Boris Johnson's announcement yesterday. Not just yesterday, by the way. He spoke over Dewbs Co, didn't he? How inconsiderate, some might say. It was timed deliberately to change the topic on some of the 6 o'clock news shows. Would I ever suggest such a thing? Never. But let's look and remind ourselves of what these measures are. Guidance to work from home if you can from Monday. Face masks to be worn in places like cinemas and theatres from Friday. Not pubs though. COVID passes for nightclubs and large venues are on the way. And daily testing for people identified as the contacts of a coronavirus case. Right, the measures, they were announced, of course, hours after the advisor, Allegra Stratton, resigned in tears following a leaked video which suggested that Downing Street hosted a Christmas party when London was, of course, near Tier 3 last December. I've got to ask you, though, what do you think to all this? Because it seems to me like people are really divided on this. I've done a few polls on my social media where I'm asking you things like, do you still back Boris? I'm asking you about should we be in Plan B? And one of the overriding messages that I keep getting, I certainly keep getting them, is stop bashing Boris. That honestly comes through as such a strong message, which I find quite fascinating, because even if you do support Boris Johnson, is there a part of you that thinks, come on now, all these own goals, at what point do we start to question Boris Johnson? There's a big side of the fence that thinks, hang on a second, who is leaking these videos from a year ago and why? What are their motivations? Why now? They're coming out, so get in touch. I've mentioned the email gbviews@gbnews.uk or Twitter, of course, at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews, and let me know your thoughts. But let's start on Plan B. I'm going to pick up with you, John Gaunt. Yeah. What do you make to this? Was Boris Johnson right to do what he did yesterday?
Yeah, he was, but he obviously watered it down because of this whole ridiculous story about the parties a year ago. I'm with your viewers, and I've been getting the same thing on Twitter. Gaunty, go on tonight and don't bash Boris. You've got to remember, a large amount of the audience of GB News voted for Boris because Boris said he'd deliver Brexit. Now, whether it was the Brexit we all hope for is open to debate, and it's a different story. But he did deliver Brexit. He's our only rock star politician. You say Boris, everybody knows who he is. Yes, he's had the PR ability of Comical Ali from the Iraq War, you know, and I'm surprised he's only got 2 feet, because if he has a chance, he shoots himself in one. Yesterday even, the messaging is still confused. Work from home, but you can go to a Christmas party and snog. That doesn't add up to me. And
I wouldn't want to snog anyone at my work Christmas party. No offence to any of my colleagues.
That's not what I've seen written in the toilet.
Yeah, none of...
But listen, the other thing is that Boris has... People think he has delivered. They think he's a clown. They think he's a bit of a fool. But who else in the Tory party could replace him? And people should be very careful about wishing for something they may regret it. I say Boris has made loads of mistakes, but he should be backed still at the moment. At the moment, the Conservatives are like a Twitter mob on speed.
Wow.
All these no marks. Boris is their best option, end of.
End of, there you go. So it's not true, we don't just Boris bash on this programme. However, though, I do want to get into the nuts and bolts of this Plan B, because some of you might remember when it came to the whole Omicron situation, we found ourselves in the position where I think it was towards the end of November when we started getting these kind of steps towards further restrictions, so places like shops getting masks, etc. And the sentiment was very clear, wasn't it? We was going to wait and see what happened to Omicron before we looked at further restrictions. It was a number of weeks it was supposed to be waiting. We didn't wait that long at all. And here we are. We found ourselves in England on Plan B. Silky, your thoughts?
Well, I'm really disappointed and frankly outraged that we're now looking at COVID passports on a day when it's become crystal clear that people within Number 10 have a very different type of analysis of the situation because they're having a knees up. But yet again, it's one rule for them and many, many other rules for everyone else. And I think I think it's a distraction, but the worrying thing is it's actually a crossing of the Rubicon because now, for the first time, Britain is becoming a papers-carrying country. We are now expected to show medical papers on demand to people in positions of authority, bouncers, bosses, state officials, anyone, to show that we're complying with medical demands from the government. There's no evidence base for this. So we've seen COVID passes in Wales and Scotland, and they haven't made any difference to the public health situation at all. The governments there aren't even claiming that they have, because they can't, because they haven't. So it's a safety theatre policy that makes no one any safer. It makes us all much less free. I think a lot of those voters are thinking, actually, Boris may have been attractive as a character, but he's a snake in the grass. Who really is he? He's behaving like a corrupt dictator, to be honest with you. I mean, the whole way that we now just come to expect someone to stand at a lectern and tell the country, and especially a country like Britain, where we've always rejected national IDs, the fact that we're just being told that this is being imposed is an absolute outrage. And I think you'll see millions of British people standing up against it and not complying with these demands.
Claire, I want to pick, because I know John's wants to come back on the COVID stuff, but you can hold that thought 1 second. Sure. Keep a tight hold of it for now. Claire, on the Boris point, what do you think to this sentiment where people are saying, stop bashing Boris?
Well, it's really, really tricky because on one hand, John is right. What do you have as your alternative? You look at the cabinet that we currently have and you can't see anybody that's ready to take over. The opposition is not in any fit state to be governing the country, so you can't even look to changing a government at any point. But I do take a slight offence to the fact that we need a rock star as a Prime Minister. I don't want that. I want somebody competent. And I don't think that he is in any way up to the job of being a Prime Minister. Yes, you have to have a character. That goes throughout history. It's those that have a certain something about them. They can walk into a room, you know that they're there. But I also want somebody that can do the detail, and I think that's what he's lacking. And he doesn't pay attention. He lets it all go, and he thinks that he can just bluster his way through, and people will go, he's a nice man, I'd like to have a drink in a pub with him. Well, yeah, OK, that's great, but not leading my country, especially through times of a pandemic. We've been through Brexit. We are potentially coming into sort of worse problems next year financially. Is he the right man for the job? No, I don't think so. But what do you do, and how else do you look round it? You know, that, I think, is a matter for the members of Parliament who do have a process that they can follow to remove him.
What was you just about to say? Was you about to come back on the Boris front?
No, I'll come back on the two. I can combine the two things. The basic thing with Boris is the SPADs, these young kids straight out of Oxbridge who become the advisors. It's the same with Labour. They're the people who are dictating the policy. The older politicians are going with it. That's why we've got all this green nonsense at the moment. You know, you can't have somebody who's 25 and 27, never had a proper job in their lives, dictating policy. If he had better people around him, he might be better. He's a front man. He's a front man.
And you need people to say no, and I think that's half the problem, is that you've got nobody standing up there and saying, actually, no, don't do that. It's ridiculous.
And I think in the cabinet itself, there's no real grown-ups. And I think this started really when we moved away from cabinet responsibilities. You could say it started with Blair. You could say it's carried on from there. So we've got this leader. If you get rid of him, you didn't really, with the greatest respect, have a solution to who you'd put in there instead of him. And then going back to Silky's view about there'll be a massive uprising, there won't. There won't. Every single poll, most people have said, we want tougher restrictions. They're backing Boris. I don't live in London. I live in, well, I'm from Coventry, but I live in Warwick at the moment. I got on the train I went to Leamington, got my beard cut, made quite a good job, and everybody had a mask on. I got on the train at Warwick, everybody had a mask on. About 3 people when we got towards some godforsaken place near London got on without masks. The majority of people will comply. Don't get carried away with this London political Westminster bubble that we all can fall into living in, you know, and these awful expressions like, oh, it's cutting through. What, cutting through to the plebs, you mean? The Northerners?
Let me make myself clear.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that the majority of people will not comply. And social change never really happens in that way. But I think that there is a big enough portion of the public that sees through the very mendacious person that he is and the useless leader that he is, and sees through the safety theatre of this policy of vaccine passports in particular, who will say no. And actually, a lot of those people are in his own party, who he relies on. So there will be a rebellion in Parliament from his own benches. And there will be in the public as well. But this is actually a problem, because the problem is that he's not trustworthy. And a lot of people are just shedding trust in this government for all kinds of different reasons. And in a pandemic, you can't lose the trust of the public. But that's what he's doing. This is an evidence-based policy. We're all sort of agreeing on the fact that we're looking at something that changes the nature of freedoms and civil liberties and human rights and equality in Britain, and it's not an evidence-based policy. This is insanity defined, and it's dangerous.
There's a massive contradiction, let me tell you, with ordinary people. My father-in-law died just before the pandemic started, but everything about his death has been influenced by the pandemic, right? So he couldn't get buried for ages and ages. We had him cremated without a service, and then we were going to have a funeral because only 6 people could go. There's 7 kids in the family. So we've been affected by it, and I'm blooming angry about them having this party. But it was mostly these young kids who were having this party. Every one of them I'd sack, because you wouldn't miss them. And her crying on the doorstep, wipe your tears, love, and do your job. But she can't do a job because she's not old enough and experienced enough. Now, here's the contradiction.
But if
here's the contradiction.
Doesn't know what's going on,
let me just tell you what the contradiction is.
Then how can he run the country?
Let me tell you the contradiction.
That's a good question.
Yeah, it is good, and I'll answer it. The contradiction is my mother-in-law and all of my associated family and all my mates still want Boris because they look at the rest of them and they see he's the only leader. And that's the thing. So go on, your question was what? I forgot.
Well, saying if he doesn't know that a party's going on in his own house, how can he run the country?
Well, it's not his house, is it? Come on. Have you been in Downing Street? I'm sure you have. Is it a house?
You're saying he doesn't know what's going on under his own nose.
I don't care whether he knows.
And he's lied about it for a long time.
Yeah, he has probably lied.
And now he's taking away the civil liberties of British people as a distraction. That is despicable. He characterises himself as a libertarian. He's anything but.
Yes, I agree.
He's an absolute danger to this country.
He's not a libertarian.
And I agree. It's time for MPs now to take a grip. Because this situation is in freefall. We're in a perilous situation. We're losing freedoms that are going to be so hard to get back.
And I do worry what you go on to next. And so we've got some sensible, mask wearing. I don't have a problem with this.
Well, just tell me, Claire, because I'm going to take a break in a second. And when we come back, I want to get properly into the things like the max, the compulsory vaccination and the mask. And I want to get properly into that. But just before I head to the break, just tell me, if you was still advising the Tories now, because it's like being a pinball, you're ricocheting from one catastrophe to another in the last 24, 48 hours. What would you be telling them in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, is to come clean, be consistent with messaging and be honest.
There you go, be honest. See, that's all we want. I am going to take a quick break. When I come back, though, I want you to have a think about it in the meantime, because I want to get into where the situation that we are now, this national conversation that we apparently need to have about mandatory vaccines, which, by the way, if you ask me, should be a very short conversation, because the answer to that should be not a chance. However, I'm not in charge of this country, so that I suspect the conversation will be slightly longer than that. But in the meantime, do get in touch and let me know. This whole kind of thing about the whole Boris Johnson situation, the parties that want a party, whatever whatever it was. Has that made you trust any less in Boris Johnson? Has that made you reflect on whether or not you will follow some of these kind of measures or not? Get in touch, GBViews at GBnews.uk. Going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will be talking about the new COVID measures. Should we be following them? Should they be in place in the first instance? And what about this national conversation about mandatory vaccines? I even say that sentence. I can't even believe I even need to say that sentence. I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good evening. Many of us having a fairly wet end to the day, but tomorrow a bright and breezy kind of day, but there will be showers, particularly in the west, and a pretty cold feel as well with that breeze picking up. At the moment we've got low pressure to the northwest, but this weather front is slicing its way across the country, bringing outbreaks of rain and particularly some heavy bursts across the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast in the next few hours. It does all tend to scoot out into the North Sea through the early hours, so things becoming drier in the east. But further west there will be showers, those showers of snow over the Scottish mountains, but at low levels hail is likely and the showers could be pretty lively. As the wet weather clears away and skies stay clear across Scotland for longest, there could be a touch of frost here, which might mean it's a little icy first thing on Friday morning. During Friday, though, much of the east dry and bright with sunny spells, and the same goes for southern England. A few showers in the southwest. Certainly lots of showers for northwest England, Wales, Northern Ireland and western Scotland. Heavy showers, rain at low levels, yes, some snow over the Scottish hills, but as I said, hail and thunder likely in those showers as well. They'll zip through on the breeze, and that breeze will make it feel chilly. Temperatures close to average, but feeling colder because of that wind. The wind and the showers all tend to fade a little through Friday evening, so many places again becoming dry and clear, and it will turn frosty, certainly across Scotland, parts of northern England as we head into the weekend. Further west, though, the cloud is gathering, and we'll see more rain pushing back into Northern Ireland initially, then into western Scotland during Saturday morning, and also rain then creeping into western parts of England and Wales before Saturday lunchtime. The easternmost parts of England stay largely dry through Saturday, but it will cloud over and it will feel cold here after that frosty start. Slowly but surely, as the rain arrives elsewhere, it'll start to turn milder. A milder day for all on Sunday, but a predominantly cloudy day with some rain and the winds picking up once more, particularly so on Sunday night.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
On Brazier at 8, David Attenborough is plain wrong why Elon Musk says the human species faces extinction because we've forgotten how to make babies. Also the language of race. Sir Lenny Henry has persuaded Britain's TV industry to drop the term BAME. Should we listen to him? And the man who sacked 900 of his employees by Zoom. We talked to one of those on the call about the right way to let someone go. That's Brazier from 8.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
GBViews at GBnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back. I'm just looking at some of your emails. Like I said at the start of the show, I do think there's a real split down the middle, it would appear, about where people sit at the moment when it comes to some of the things that are going on at the moment. I think, as I was discussing just before the break, there's so many people that have had their lives negatively impacted by COVID restrictions, so they are very upset that the people that have set those rules have seemingly been breaking them. There's a lot of suspicion as to who is leaking this footage and why now, what's going on. There's a real sentiment that somehow the media seems desperate to bring down Boris Johnson, and they've got their own agendas going on. I mean, I have to say, I've noticed myself some journalists and the like that have really, I mentioned this on Twitter yesterday, salivating at what's potentially gone on in Boris Johnson's abode, or at least within Downing Street, while simultaneously, by the way, have been in trouble for their own rule breaking. Make of that what you will. Anyway, let's get into what was announced yesterday, this whole Plan B situation. In particular, one of the things that concerned me, I have to say, is this whole kind of concept of compulsory vaccination, because keen viewers will know that I've spent quite some time covering protests against things like vaccination passports. There has been global mass protests, by the way, in various different countries, France, Italy, Germany, Australia, to name just a few. And there's a reason why I've been kind of covering these things. Often you viewers will get in touch with me and say, Michelle, why are you showing me what's going on in Austria or Greece or wherever? We don't live in Austria or Greece or Australia. My response to that has always been the same. I know we don't live in Austria or Greece or Australia, but you've got to have an eye on some of these places, because if all of those kind of things are going on there, then you can bet your bottom dollar that it won't be too long before they start coming on here. And here we are. And we've had a press conference yesterday. We've got Plan B, which many of you will appreciate, will like, many of you will dislike. And we've got conversations apparently starting to be taking place about mandatory vaccinations. Goodness me, Silky Carlo.
I mean, it's a pinch yourself moment, I think, a reflection of how far down the path towards an absurd level of authoritarianism that we are. And given that there are large parts of the West that are now suddenly all examining this same idea about mandatory vaccines, some are actually doing it, often in ways that just punish the most vulnerable people. I mean, in Greece, for example, using mandatory vaccines as a tax on people, so poor people have no choice, all this kind of stuff. It's absolutely disgusting to see. And I think it's a moment when you really want to define our own national values. What is it? What are British values now? What's our approach to this? Ordinarily, you would expect that the UK would take international leadership on human rights issues like these and be a beacon for democracy. We should have our politicians standing up there saying, never over our dead bodies would we contemplate a policy like mandatory vaccines in Britain. That's not what we're seeing. We've seen lies, we've seen U-turns. How many ministers have said, we won't have vaccine passports, we won't have mandatory vaccines, and then suddenly, when it's politically convenient, we need to have a national conversation about it. Well, let's have the conversation. Let's make it short, because I think if we know what our national identity is, and we know that we stand for freedom and equality and choice, then this is something that should be a no-brainer. It's incredibly damaging that Boris Johnson has even contemplated the idea. It's sickening. He really needs to say, not only within Britain, we will never have mandatory vaccines, but also the rest of the world. We should be discouraging other countries from doing this, because it's... yet again, this is a line that has been crossed that you just cannot come back from. And we're seeing, you look at somewhere like New York now, you can't get a job, public sector or private sector, without showing that you're double vaccinated. And what was interesting, what Boris said yesterday with the vaccine passes, it's 2 jabs for now.
For now.
Under review. How many more will it be?
John, go on. Mandatory vaccination.
Listen, there'd be no need for a conversation about mandatory vaccination if the 5 million in this country who haven't had it done yet did their duty, rolled up their sleeve and got vaccinated. What possible reason, apart from a true medical exemption, can there be not to have it? That's what's wrong. They're the people who are creating medical apartheid. They're the people who are creating a two-tier society. And, you know, it's great, all this, you know, freedom for Tooting, Wolfie Smith, you know, we should be a beacon of light and the rest of it that you describe. I agree on lots of levels. But there's a pandemic.
Who is it you think should be having these vaccines?
I thought we were going to have a conversation. It's a conversation we need to have, and I disagree with you, Michelle. It needs to be a long conversation, and the whole of the British public need to be involved.
Who do you think
all
should
of
have
the
them?
media.
Who? Just adults, kids? Who?
No, I would take it down to 5-year-olds. That's my personal view, but I'll get shouted down for that. But I'm allowed to have my view.
You are allowed to have your
allowed to have
view.
her view, and that's the debate we should have. You know, I was watching Dan last night. Dan's immediate reaction to all this, you know, Dan Wootton was, no, and that was the biggest story of the night. Well,
You
it
wouldn't.
isn't,
Why would
because
you?
it isn't at the moment a policy. What Boris said was, let's have a conversation.
Why
And
would
I
you
want
give a
that
5-year-old a vaccination for an illness which will barely affect them?
Why not?
Why would
Because
you?
it's about protection of the whole society.
Why
I know
would
you think
you-
this is the big winning argument.
Oh, I think
It
it's
isn't.
appalling. I think,
no,
I
that's
think
fine.
the
It's your opinion.
concept of injecting a 5-year-old child with a vaccination for which there is no long-term data, and it's been proven that there are side effects, for an illness which will barely affect the child, I cannot. It's almost akin to child abuse.
No, it's not.
To knowingly
No,
do that.
it's
To
not.
me, it is.
No, it's not.
To me, it is.
Well, you can say it. I don't think it's anything like child abuse. And the second thing is, of course, there's no long-term data. This pandemic's only just hit us. But it's better to be prepared. That's my view.
Claire, before I spontaneously combust,
Slap me.
before I spontaneously combust, allow me a moment to relax.
Okay.
What's your view?
OK, a conversation does need to be had. I think that we can all see that there is misinformation around vaccines.
Yeah.
You can see it on social media, you see it in newspapers, speaking to people, and outside of the Westminster bubble, I do speak to, you know, actual people. And there is misinformation, especially within certain communities.
Yeah.
So why not go after those groups and say, OK, come on then, what is your debate about it? Why are you hesitant to have a vaccine? But it should be down to personal choice. And what are we running towards? Saying mandatory vaccines, are we going to go the whole hog and start holding people down and injecting them? What will you do with people who refuse to be vaccinated?
We'll just
You're gonna
exclude them from
segregate
polite society.
Well,
they won't be
really?
able to go to
From
rock
what?
concerts, they won't be able to go to the theatre,
And then
they
it's
won't be
going
able to
to
go to
extend
so
into
coerce
shops,
them.
into...
Well, it's
you know,
already in
those-
jobs.
No, I'm
So I
sorry.
told you a
I
bit ago.
don't...
It's already in jobs.
In Great Britain, to have people segregated
Why?
who will not be able to walk around their own
They
country.
segregate themselves.
No,
Have
this,
the
this,
injection.
Then what
this
happens?
sort of language.
Dead simple. Have the injection.
No.
This sort of language is really unhelpful, and what we're doing is what some people are doing is talking about a section of society as though they are a subclass, as though they're a different type of person who should have less rights and less freedoms, and as though they're worth less. They should be destitute. They shouldn't have jobs. They should be socially and economic excluded.
I don't understand. I thought the vaccination was free.
You should understand, because that's
I thought the vaccination was free.
What you're suggesting.
No, it isn't. That's an absolute misrepresentation. I'm saying,
Well, you're saying
get
they
the
shouldn't
vaccination.
be able to be socially included.
Yeah.
So can they have jobs? I mean, where do you...
If an employer says, I don't want to employ people who aren't vaxxed, that employer has the right. Just like if you run a restaurant or a nightclub, I don't want you in here if you've not jabbed. They are not being the fascists. They're not excluding them. These 5 million people, and I accept fully what you're saying, that, you know, some of them are certain communities. Let's put more education in there. Let's get role models to help them. But in the end, there's no excuse, apart from a true medical exemption, for not having
What about personal
a vax.
choice? Do you
we
not
live
think...
in a society. We live in a society.
I mean, just to bring this
Why
down
wouldn't you
earth
want
a
to
little
protect
bit.
yourself and protect other people?
Just bear in mind, ONS data, 98% of the population test positive for antibodies. 90% of the population are vaccinated. In what world does this kind of extraordinary draconian policy be justified with statistics like that?
Which draconian policy?
Of vaccine.
Asking everybody to make sure they get the vaccine. That's draconian, isn't it?
Are you in favour of compulsion?
No, it's not.
Are you in favour of compulsion? So if you ask everyone and then there's a certain group of people that say, I don't want it, are you in favour of then mandatory,
Well, the compulsion
compulsory?
argument is very difficult, isn't it? As proved by Austria and as proved by Greece and other countries. It is a problem, which is where that conversation needs to happen. But you see, if you characterise me as if I'm saying, you know, we'll go around as stormtroopers, hold people on the floor and inject them, that is not where I'm coming from. What I'm saying is, and I said it right at the beginning of this part of the conversation, is how sad, as a society, and I believe in society, how sad that 5 million people, often provoked by social commentators on TV and radio stations, somehow, who, by the way, are all double vaxxed and have been away on holidays to places like Antigua, how can they wind up the population so people say, oh, I'm not having it because I can't name the names for obvious reasons, so-and-so says not to have it. That's what's dangerous. Those 5 million people, put the resources in, educate them more, show them more, but in the end, explain to them about the idea of what a society is. No man is an island.
Which is what I said right at the beginning, that you need to tackle the misinformation and you need to encourage people, but I don't think you can make them have it. I am really, really uncomfortable with mandating a vaccine, especially when we don't know the long-term effects.
It'll be mandated
and I know
whether you like it or not.
Well, it's got to go through on Tuesday. There's no reason to see that it will, looking at the rebellion at the moment, which is growing. So it isn't necessarily going to go through, and don't preempt that.
But you just said, John, it'll be mandatory whether you like that or not.
In essence, it will be, won't it? Because
that's
where it's going
coercion.
to. But we don't... Well, I haven't got a problem with coercion.
So
I'll tell you where I'd start with coercion. No Premiership footballer, no professional sports person should be allowed to compete anymore unless they have it. Because especially in certain communities, they could be real role models.
You do realise as well that people can still catch and transmit COVID when they've got their vaccinations, don't you?
Yeah, but the counter-argument to that is, of course, it reduces transmission and it reduces the severity. And I worry about our hospitals being overrun. And I know now the answer to that will be, oh, well, they're not being at the moment. But if you look at what Sajid Javid did today, it's doubling or tripling, certainly doubling every 2 to 3 days.
What is?
That's the cases.
But that's the cases.
You need to look at hospitalisations, which will be the next factor in looking at any kind of restrictions coming in.
Yes.
Will be hospitalisations.
But cases will lead to hospitalisations, won't they?
Well, not
or they'll
necessarily.
lead to a fact that the NHS is so busy dealing with the people who have got this now mild, if it turns out to be mild, disease, that the NHS will be under real pressure. And that's before you add into the equation Delta, which is still there. Let's not act as if Delta has gone away.
It is, but you're just ignoring the fact that the 90% of people that have got antibodies in the country anyway. So even if they do catch COVID, it is going to be less virulent. It is not going to affect them.
You met anybody who's had it?
Yeah, and I know, and we've lost.
And how bad is it?
Well, we've lost somebody as well.
Yeah,
so,
I've lost 3
I do
people, and I've had 3 friends just recently.
And my son has
He's
had
so
COVID.
poorly.
So yeah,
But you wouldn't wish that on anyone, would you?
No, I wouldn't
Even
wish
just
it on
being
anybody
poorly.
at all. But I wouldn't wish flu on anybody. Because that is really debilitating.
It
But I'm
is.
not looking at mandatory vaccinations for influenza every year.
Now, I haven't said that we're going to hold people down and force them to have it.
But
what I'm saying.
But you want to coerce them. You want to coerce them to within. You want to coerce someone to within an inch of their life until they eventually give in.
I'm sorry.
But you've just said that they shouldn't be able to work in some instances.
I didn't say that.
Well, you tell me that. What are you saying?
My position is top sports people shouldn't be able to play sport.
So they can't work. You lose their livelihood.
No, they've got to have the vax. They've got to lead by example. That's them, right?
But you're saying, but then how can you?
You're not letting me finish.
Because I'm understanding what you're saying. You're saying
I'm going to tell
that you want to coerce people to the point where they lose their livelihoods, and you've just said no, and then you gave the example.
Professional footballers.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
the
professional
business.
footballers
It's no one's
and
business.
sports people should be vaccinated.
And if they don't,
should be
they lose
singing
their
about it
livelihoods.
to help other people. Yeah.
So if they don't, so you want people
I don't know
to
if they
lose their livelihood.
They just wouldn't play. I think
But that's
it's
their
ridiculous that
livelihoods.
everybody who goes to a football match now will have to be vaccinated, right? But the footballers don't have to be. How ridiculous is that? Or the rugby players. Anyway, let's move away from those sorts of people. This idea, and it's been spouted all the time, about coercion. Well, that's not coercion. It's about encouraging.
Of course it's coercion.
We can't carry on with 5 million people unvaccinated.
Right, John
cannot.
Gaunt, on the footballers, and I'll keep it to your example. If you say to a footballer, you have to have your vaccine or you lose your job, if that's not coercion, what is it?
I didn't say lose their job, I said they wouldn't play.
But that is their job. A professional footballer, their job is football.
In the football dressing rooms, these people who, on the whole, not all of them, are not highly educated, are spreading the fake news and the myths. We've got to face up to this. We've got to ask them to help the cause. And we've got to educate other communities who are causing these problems.
This sounds like the kind of approach that, like, the Chinese state takes towards its
I wonder when we'll get to China.
You know, like, they have to be, like, part of the state apparatus, and they have to, you know, basically be propaganda icons. I mean, sure, positive encouragement for health measures is always a good thing. But when we're saying that somehow we should have state ownership of sports people and they must go out and project a message and they must disclose their medical records to the public.
You're saying state ownership. I've not said state ownership.
All right, well, John ownership,
well,
whatever you want to call it.
Look how
we've crossed a very
strange threshold. We do it to kick racism out of
threshold.
football. Look how we've kicked racism out of football.
What?
By footballers taking the lead. I'm not talking about BLM and dropping the knee. I'm talking about unite against racism. It's worked.
But
the football terraces now are completely different because football fans know, and they will self-govern now, they don't want racism on the terraces.
Very, very different to somebody's medical information, which is private.
What medical information? Well, having an injection.
Yeah, and it's nobody else's business if you have or you haven't. So why are you asking a section of society to stand up and say, yes, I've had it, you must all have it? No, right, encouragement, yes, but putting these people out there and revealing their medical history to the world, for what reason?
Well, medical history, it's an injection, it's a vaccination. This is simply
and it's private.
A libertarian... Well, no, it's not like a medical procedure. We're not asking, have you had a smear test? Have you had this? It's nonsense.
It's a medical intervention.
I'm sorry. We've got a little mark on our arm, most of us, haven't we, which showed that we had the BCG when we were kids.
Right,
it's
well,
rubbish.
I tell you what...
And you love pushing this line, and it's nonsense. I'm sorry.
Well, I tell you what...
This is why we need the conversation.
Well, we're having the conversation. All I will say is, God help anyone that tried to make me have anything injected into me that I didn't want. I will be making decisions as to what I have injected in me or I do not. Nobody will take that decision away from me. You can remove livelihoods and you can coerce and you can do whatever you want to me. Wouldn't happen, I can tell you that for free. Anyway, we shall take a break. When we come back, we'll park the COVID bit. Some of you might be pleased to know. We'll park COVID for a moment. We'll be looking instead at a consultation that started today about prosecutors apparently meeting victims before deciding whether a suspect should be charged. This is the concept of a new victims law. What do you think to that? I'll see you in just a few minutes.
Coming up on Dan Wootton Tonight. Should the death penalty be reintroduced for child killers after the murder of Arthur Labinjo Hughes? I'll get your verdict in the clash. Is the Together movement our best hope of saving us from vaccine passports? Alan Miller, one of the coalition's major figures and co-founder of Open for All, joins me in Uncancelled. Plus, GB News star Mark Dolan gives his verdict on a crazy week, and I'll break down the day's top headlines with my superstar panel, the former Lib Dem MP Lember Kopik, Conservative commentator Dominique Samuels, and the broadcaster and author Amy Nicole. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Well, I can tell you that we are still, even during the break, having a bit of a set to, shall we say, to put it mildly. He says settle on him. I'm trying to make him see sense. I've got to say I'm failing. I'm going to move the story on. So I want to move away from COVID for a brief moment, if I may. If you were a victim of crime, maybe you have been, and if you were, what do you think about your voice? Was it heard loudly enough? Do you think that you and your experience had enough of an impact on the outcome of the crime? Should it have had a little bit more? I'll tell you for why I'm asking. There is a consultation that's now opened, focusing on the so-called victims law, which is looking at how can we make victims more and their experiences more front and centre, I guess, to the outcome of the crime. So, for example, prosecutors could be required to meet victims before making decisions on whether a suspect should be charged or not. I got to say, all of this sounds great, sitting in a TV studio, pontificating about it. Of course, who wouldn't want their experience to be taken into consideration? However, I do think to myself, are the people that are suggesting this living in the real world? Because when I had a very brief look today at some of the backlogs on some of the courts, they are in their tens and tens and tens of thousands because, of course, the COVID restrictions. So great in theory, but in practice, Claire, really?
No, I don't think we should. And I'm not going to take anything away from a victim, but the purpose of law and courts is to look at evidence placed in front of them. So therefore, you need to do that without emotion. And some crimes are going to have such a high emotional attachment to them, if you're looking at any kind of assault cases or rape cases, then you would be skewed by those stories because they will be harrowing. You know that, whether it is a man, whether it's a woman or it's a child, it's going to be pretty horrific. And I wouldn't want prosecutors and defence lawyers holding up the system going, oh, we need to talk about this for a few months, and then making a decision based around the heart rather than the head. We have the rule of law for a reason, and it needs to be free from that emotion.
So, okay.
I mean, I'm all for the victim's voice being heard, of course, but I'm a bit worried that really this policy is window dressing. It doesn't seem to actually be addressing the serious issues that there are with the justice system. The justice system is in absolute tatters, particularly where serious offences like sexual offences are concerned. Only about 1% of people, suspects in rape and sexual offences cases are actually being charged. These cases aren't being properly dealt with, they're not being properly investigated, and we keep seeing these kinds of policies that are headline grabbers that have no real substance. I want to see funding going into the justice system, I want to see proper resourcing going to the police, and real meaningful policies that start to fix the justice system rather than just create headlines.
John?
Well, like you, I agree with you. It sounds like a really attractive proposal. But I also agree with you at the end there, Silky, because the bottom line is the whole justice system needs root and branch reform, including the people who put down the sentences. I mean, the latest case of the little baby who was tortured for 6-year-old.
Arthur, for that whole
period. you've got to look at social services, you've got to look at the funding of social services, you've got to look at the police, you've got to look at the Crown Prosecution Service, and then sexual assault. I'm a father of 2 daughters. It's just not taken seriously. No. It's just not taken seriously. So-called a domestic as well, that all needs looking at. We need to take it much more seriously. And I say it, we need harsher sentences. How ridiculous that those two, I can't say the word, but they got 19 and 28 years or whatever between each, when they should have got life, and life must, in this country, mean life. That's what we were told when they removed the death penalty. It never does. Look at the latest thing where Pitchfork was allowed out again. It's just too soft. It's just too ridiculous. And I'm not a bread and water merchant, by the way. I believe in massive investment in our prisons to educate people. You only have to look at some of the people who have been educated, who have found a new future through art and through, music, etc. People can be reformed. I don't know whether the killers of Little Arthur can be reformed.
Oh, don't even get me started.
I don't even think I want to worry about it.
No, I can't. I mean, we covered that story, didn't we?
Yeah.
I think it's probably one of the most heartbreaking stories I've ever heard in my whole life. I've got to say, and I can't emotionally get back into that one tonight. Let's move on to something that made me chuckle, so it did. Travelodge, a hotel that many of us probably will have stayed in at some point or another. Well, they have shared some of their weirdest requests from customers this year so far. One of them, a guest asked a staff member to go into the next room and sing so that he could check that his room was quiet enough. A spokeswoman said that they like to go above and beyond to help the guests because they relish a challenge. I've got to say, though, some of the customer requests are going beyond their control. Stuff like they've had requests to arrange tea with pandas, getting seagulls to sing instead of squawk, and even being asked for a children's paddling pool so that a customer's pet fish could have a nice relaxing night. Like I said, I've stayed in a Travelodge before, but none of those odd requests from me, I can tell you that for free. Claire, have you ever made odd requests, or have you ever worked in a hotel and received them?
No, I haven't. I haven't made any odd requests, but I do remember staying at a Travelodge for a wedding. And next door to it was in the countryside, and next door was a field full of cows. And so they, mooched off as cows do, and they mooched back. And the wedding party wished the hotel to move the cows because they didn't look very pretty in the photographs. And I must admit to having a little bit of a chuckle myself as the cows just came patrolling past and the smell came with them.
I've got to say, Silke, have you ever worked in a hotel or had anything where you've had to deal with random public requests?
Not of that type, no.
Oh, this sounds like you've got some kind of story instead.
The paddling pool for the fish was me.
No, it wasn't. John Gaunt, what about you? Have you ever been in a customer serving role?
Yeah, I've worked in bars and owned a nightclub and owned pubs and stuff. But my biggest thing, I don't know, I might be doing a great disservice to Travelodge because I get them mixed up with Premier Inn. But I judge a hotel now, and I think Travelodges are great, and I think they've revolutionised the hotel trade. But I judge it on this. If I'm in a hotel, my wife's not there, I ring her and I say, squidgy soap, and she knows what that means. Why on earth do they have those things attached to the wall in the shower where you've got to squeeze the soap out? Can't they just give us a bar of soap or a little sachet of shampoo?
A bar of soap? What, one per new guest?
Well, I prefer that to the squeezy. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Of course
it's attached to the wall.
Yeah.
I
do bathe. I mean, I do, yes. I do bathe on occasion. On a Sunday, I was in Overers. On a Sunday on bath night, yes, I do use soap.
The only thing I've ever found once, we stayed at, the posh hotel where they had the G7 in Cornwall. We stayed in that, but before it was refurbed, about 25 years ago, we found a pubic hair in the teapot. Well, you asked.
In the teapot?
Yeah, and I requested for it to move, and they said no, so I said, right, we're off. We went and got another hotel. In the teapot.
I mean,
come on.
I'm now going to end my show wondering in my own mind why on earth a pubic hair would find itself in a teapot. That is not the way that I wanted my night to end, I can tell you. But well done, checking the teapot before you use it, John. That's very good.
Oh, cool.
I've never really worked in customer service roles like being a waitress or anything like that. I don't like people enough. I know that sounds awful, but I don't. Like all these companies saying we aim to please and the customer, I'd just be like, oh, go away. It's not for me, those kind of roles, I can tell you. Anyway, that is all we've got got time for you guys. I can tell you now, so many reactions flying in. Lots of you are not liking the idea of compulsory vaccinations, I can tell you, but some are. It's also got to be said. Anyway, Silky, Carlo, Claire, thanks for your company. Thank you, of course, for yours, and I shall see you the same time tomorrow, 6 o'clock until 7 o'clock. Have yourself a very good evening in the meantime.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good evening. Many of us having a fairly wet end to the day, but tomorrow a bright and breezy kind of day, but there will be showers, particularly in the west, and a pretty cold feel as well with that breeze picking up. At the moment we've got low pressure to the northwest, but this weather front is slicing its way across the country, bringing outbreaks of rain and particularly some heavy bursts across the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast in the next few hours. It does all tend to scoot out into the North Sea through the early hours, so things becoming drier in the east. But further west there will be showers, those showers of snow over the Scottish mountains, but at low levels hail is likely and the showers could be pretty lively. As the wet weather clears away and skies stay clear across Scotland for longest, there could be a touch of frost here, which might mean it's a little icy first thing on Friday morning. During Friday, though, much of the east dry and bright with sunny spells, and the same goes for southern England. A few showers in the southwest. Certainly lots of showers for northwest England, Wales, Northern Ireland and western Scotland. Heavy showers, rain at low levels, yes, some snow over the Scottish hills, but as I said, hail and thunder likely in those showers as well. They'll zip through on the breeze, and that breeze will make it feel chilly. Temperatures close to average, but feeling colder because of that wind. The wind and the showers all tend to fade a little through Friday evening, so many places again becoming dry and clear, and it will turn frosty, certainly across Scotland, parts of northern England as we head into the weekend. Further west, though, the cloud is gathering, and we'll